Are we official now?
We are official. Yeah, we're getting everybody in. Happy Friday, everybody. So
Welcome
glad to see
aboard.
so many awesome friends joining us. Hey, I'll go ahead and kind of kick things off. If we have not met before, my name is Melissa Langdale. I'm the president and COO of the Mortgage Collaborative, as always, joined by Rob Chrisman. Today, he happens to be on this side for me. And today's very special guest is Luke Babich, which is the co-founder and CEO of Clever. Luke, we're super excited to have you join us today.
I'm super excited to be with both of you.
Awesome. Well, while we get everybody in, I like to have a little bit of fun because it normally takes a couple of minutes for folks to kind of trickle in. So we're going to do a little bit of trivia, and there's definitely a purpose behind this trivia today. And there'll be well, y'all will figure it out. All right. So there are several mountains that are over 14,000 feet in Colorado. Several. Which one is the tallest? Does anybody know? It's actually at 14,433 feet, which is
Can
a
I guess?
giant mountain. Yeah.
I've been to the top of Pikes Peak. Is that it?
No. Although Ed said the same
Mm.
thing.
It's the most famous one, I guess.
It is the most famous one, I guess. Yep, Jen got it. Mount Elbert. That's awesome. All right, another fun fact. What percentage of land in the US that is above 10,000 feet is in Colorado?
Mm,
That's a good one.
that's a great one.
What do you think?
I'll say
16%.
I'll say 80.
Oh, wow.
80. Okay. Luke, what was your guess?
I'm coming in on the low end. I would still be impressed at 16%. There's a lot of states out there.
Okay. Brian says
Yeah,
30.
most of them are at sea level
Well,
or
that's true.
river level.
It's not that big a state, though. I mean,
Yeah.
Maybe I misunderstood the question. What's the question, Melissa?
I
What
think you got it.
percentage of land in the United States that is above 10,000 feet? So high elevation land, right?
Yeah,
Land
okay.
that's above 10,000 feet is in Colorado. So
I'll
what
stick with my 80%.
'All right.
80%?
You're talking me up.
What do you think, Luke? You want to
I'm
change it?
gonna come. I'm not gonna go all the way up. I'll join Brian here. Brian, you and I can hold down the low end of the spectrum.
Okay, 35%. Stephen
Where
has,
do you think the rest of it is?
I don't know. I should have Googled that.
I mean, first of all, I would be surprised, almost surprised if there was anything east of the Mississippi above 10,000 feet.
Oh,
Okay,
Tim says
but
Alaska.
yeah, Tim's got a really good call here. We got Alaska out there. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah,
lot
but
of land in
Alaska,
Alaska.
a fair chunk of Alaska is at sea level as well.
Huh.
But I've been there a few times. But anyway, there are certainly some high peaks, and there's some high peaks in the Sierra Nevada. But even Mount Whitney is the highest point in California. Well, anyway, I'm sorry, I'm droning on here. We're not talking about
Rob,
mortgages.
that was real smart, but
I'm going to
now
go
I
with
want to
I'm going
see
to
if it's
stick with
80 or if it's
80%.
35.
Well, we actually do have an exact answer. Ashley in the chat got it. So 75%.
Oh, Rob,
70%.
you're too smart. You're
Yeah.
off by
No.
5%.
Luke, no one has ever called me too smart.
Well,
Not
today's
even
a new
yourself,
day, Rob.
Rob. Well, that's why you brought me on.
All right, last trivia. Well, actually, I've got two more. Okay, 80% of Colorado's water comes from what source?
Runoff from the Coors refinery.
That would explain a lot.
Brewery.
No.
It all makes sense.
What do we think? Oh, Colorado River, Brad says.
You mean, is snow melt an answer?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, like some kind of snowpack, right?
Actually, yeah, the two of you are right. It actually comes from snow. Yeah, there you go. Okay, last one. This one actually came from Rob's commentary. So I'm sure we're gonna have lots of people that get this one. So Rob, you're not allowed to answer this one. Okay, how many listings and how many real estate agents are there based on Rob's commentary? How many?
I have links because I didn't want to answer questions the rest of the day. Like, where
Yeah.
did you get that? Where'd you get that number from? Not that that's what my emails sound like when I get them, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to put the links in there and people can do their own research.
Yeah.
Because the numbers are surprising.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, Drew got it out of the gate. 900,000 listings. Oh, Tracy, you were really close on the number of realtors. Oh, Drew, you got it. 1.6 million. Real
Drew was
estate
paying
agents. I
attention.
shouldn't say realtors, real estate agents. 1.6 million real estate agents and 900 listings.
So a lot of those, Melissa, that shows that a lot of those ads that I see in my little supermarket cart on the little fold down flap
Yeah.
are for probably agents who don't even have a listing. Not only that, but those prom photos that are in those real estate agent listings. Luke, tell me tell me when that's going to change. Tell me when truth in advertising will hit. I'm sorry, Melissa. I don't mean to go off on real estate agents.
Yeah, I'm going to cut you off super early today.
Quick, slash his mic.
You're already done.
So NAR settlement, everyone.
All right. Well, actually, let's tell everybody a little bit about Clever so that they have a baseline on why Rob is digging into realtors.
Wait a minute, I thought we were here to talk about the NRA settlement, but
we are.
Hang on, NAR. We get in very different directions if you flip a couple letters around.
Yeah.
No gun rights being discussed on this call. Sorry, we're going to lose like 40 people off of the attendees. Whoa, the wrong one. So I'll give a quick background on Clever, and then we can talk about the NAR settlement. And Clever actually just completed our third agent network survey this year. So we've been keeping a close pulse on the 24,000 realtors we work with day in and day out, as well as thousands of agents outside our network, to be able to bring some data on what is actually going on, as well as hundreds of anecdotes from different parts of the country. So it should be fun. We've got a lot of cool data and stories to dig into. But the quick background on Clever's mission is to connect people with the most trustworthy advice and the best solutions for every step of their real estate journey. And there's three pillars of the business that we've built around that idea. The first is we've developed over 20,000 educational resources to help sellers and buyers make better decisions in their journey. And so we reach 5 to 10 million readers a year through SEO who come to us as a source of advice and data. And help nurture and guide them through their journey. We then have our network of 24,000 agents. We connect sellers and buyers with local professionals in their area who've gone through a really strict vetting process and sell over $3 billion a year in real estate through our platform. And we now have passed 3,000 five-star reviews on Trustpilot.com, making us the #1 rated real estate company on Trustpilot. And then the third piece is we white label those capabilities, the marketing technology and the real estate network for financial services institutions, which is also why we are very proud to have the Mortgage Collaborative Tech Fund on our cap table as one of our investors in our B round. So that's the background on Clever and how come we have some cool data and some right to talk about what's going on with real estate agents, since we've got tens of thousands of them out there working with us to adopt new programs and grow their business.
I love it. I can't.
Trustpilot. What is Trustpilot?
It's going to be a whole other tangent. It's like a reviews website, you know? We're not on Amazon, right? So how are you going to find out if we're legit?
Snoops. Anyway, so
kind of like that, yeah.
Let's go back to real estate agent photographs, Melissa. So I think that so Luke is you're a licensed real estate agent in the state of Missouri, right?
That's right. And actually all of our, we call them our home concierges. These are the folks who onboard customers into our program and help match them with realtors, carry a real estate license. So we're not carrying listings, but we're helping drive up that 1.6 million number for you.
So in your ads, do you actually add years onto your photographs so you'll look more like you're over 19 years old?
Rob, if you take a look in the chat, it's got my headshot. I think that actually is still about 6 years ago. So at the time I would have been, 24, just old enough to buy myself a beer. So no, I'm keeping the trend of realtors having young headshots alive, and also I intend to not change that headshot anytime in the next 30 years to join one of the great traditions of real estate.
Right. Good. More power to you.
Thanks, yeah.
It's officially not a prom photo though, just so that everybody knows.
In case anyone was worried on the call. So
they say that the guys. Boy, so Luke, I should have warned you that I'm all liquored up for this phone call. They say that guys with their clothes are stuck in the last good year of their life.
okay.
I think that I read that that's actually a Jerry Seinfeld line, I think, and it just cracked me up.
The only thing I heard from Jerry Seinfeld is no soup for you. That's it. That's
Anyway, all right.
I got to reel us back in. We
okay,
are
reel us in.
The NAR settlement a little bit. Luke, I'd love to hear from you. What are you hearing from your agents? How are they, how are they handling the provisions that are now effective?
Yeah. So, just to recap, although I think for this audience, the sort of basic blocking and tackling of what's happened with the settlement is probably pretty well understood. And then Melissa, can I maybe pull up some of that data we were looking at right before the call?
Yeah,
we can dive into a few things.
Yeah.
So, obviously the sort of most material changes from an agent's point of view are, number one, you're now required to sign a buyer's agency agreement up front. And this is not radically new. We have some of our agents going, what is the hype? We've been doing this for decades. It was about 30% of the states out there already had some version of this requirement in place, but now it's nationwide. All agents need to get an agency agreement that specifies the services they're going to provide and how they get paid, signed with the client before they go provide any real estate services. So this is kind of one thing that agents are out there adjusting to. Almost every single agent who we surveyed said that their team or their brokerage has implemented some kind of training to teach buyer's agents who maybe hadn't had to do this to do the equivalent of a listing presentation, right? Listing agents, this is old news. You sit down and you make your pitch and you say, here's how I'm going to help market your home. This is what you're going to pay. They're very used to this. This is very new for buyer's agents. So you're seeing folks try to adapt and respond. Zillow rolled out an agreement that agents can use just for a showing. So, hey, Melissa, let's sign this agreement together just for this one house, no compensation involved. And then at the end of that showing, the agent can say, okay, well, now if you want to work on an ongoing basis, I need a long-term agency agreement. Yeah. And so, I saw Joe is there kind of acting exactly on this kind of asking about exactly that kind of question. So of course, the industry is doing what it does best on this first provision, which is innovating fiercely so as to change as little as possible and preserve the status quo. Agents are amazing at it. The second thing that has changed is that, the seller is no longer setting the buyer's agent commission. And so this is the other thing, of course, agents are reacting to a lot, is that normally they're used to the seller and the listing agent agreeing on a price that they can then see for what they're willing to offer to a buyer's agent. And now this question is getting punted over to the buyer's agent and their client of how much you're going to get paid. And then, of course, they can make whatever offer they want to the seller of include this as a discount, give me this as a concession so that they can work it into the price of the mortgage and the home. So we're seeing agents kind of respond to those two big changes of needing the agency agreement up front, and then the question of pricing getting kicked over to the buyer's agent instead of owned by the listing agent.
So I think it would be helpful to touch on Joe's comment or question a little bit, but I also have a question around if you're seeing commissions change as a result of it now being in the buyer's hands.
So this is one of the big questions is, are the rates changing? And if they are changing, when are they going to stop changing? What is the new normal we're converging on? So there, I'm going to let the data do some of the talking. So in our sort of pre and post survey of what agents are seeing in their local market, this was about 600 agents in both surveys. And here was what they told us. Can you see the screen okay? We've got the big slide. Yeah. So in our survey before the settlement, folks were seeing about 2.83% for listing agents. That's fallen. And then seeing about 2.66% for buyer's agents. That's also fallen. Now, interestingly, it's fallen about equivalently across the country on the list side and the buy side. And I want to call out one thing to put this in context, which is that this is a very normal range of fluctuation. So this is buyer's agent fees on actual closed transactions. So before, this is an anecdote from agents. On this slide, we've got agent self-reporting. What are you seeing in your market? This is actual buyer's agent fees on transactions that are closing. So actually in August, they reached a local max from the data that we're tracking, the highest they had been since deals closing in March. And so this isn't hitting transactions today, but agents are seeing after the settlement some increased anecdotal competition, but all within a very normal range between this kind of 2.5, 2.7 that you see playing out all year. So there's nothing in this data that looked especially alarming or signaled a macro shift to us. However, there are a few things that suggest bigger shifts might be starting to play out. Not crazy flip the table shifts, but definitely bigger than this kind of right within the normal range of fluctuation. So this was from a survey we did earlier in the year, which was asking the agents how much they think buyer's agent fees are going to change. So when the settlement comes into effect, what are you expecting? And you see a pretty wide spread here, but also some consensus on this 2% range, right? There's a good amount under, there's a lot right at that 2 to 2.5. And then a little bit of folks who are going, there's not going to be any change. And so the kind of other piece of this is on this next pass at the survey, we went back and asked agents, well, okay, just you personally, let's not talk about the rest of the market. What is the lowest buyer's agent fee you would work with? And here you see an even clearer story of agents wanting to hold the line at 2%. Really broad consensus. Again, this is hundreds of agents in different states all over the country. And except for our friend over here who wants to be a contrarian, you have a lot of folks kind of saying 2% is where the industry is going to converge. That's a pretty big shift from the 266 basis points that we've been seeing most recently. This hasn't played out, but I think there's a little bit of self-fulfilling prophecy potentially in agents thinking that 2% is going to be the new number, because we have heard from a majority of the agents that we surveyed that they are seeing other folks in their area drop their buyer's agent fees to try to be more competitive and to respond to buyers having questions about, hey, I hear something's different. What is it? So let me pause there. That's kind of the data we've got on where rates might be heading.
That's really interesting. I wonder if your outlier is in $1 million market or there's something wonky going on there. But, I'm also curious about, I mean, if 2% is the number, let's just say that's the number. Like, and I know we can't really see this today. We'll have to watch this over time, but I'm really curious the impact this has on first-time home buyers. And I've heard about all sorts of things that folks are doing. There are some bond programs that are putting some extra language in around what the DPA can really be paid for, or what the DPA can really be used for, if that can be used to kind of pay commissions. So I've heard some things like that, but there's also some unsecured personal loans that folks are taking to pay for commission rates if for some reason, like Jen's scenario happens in the chat where they had to find another house because the seller refused to pay any buyer's commission. So I'm just really curious how this is going to affect them.
And this to me is kind of the crux of what we want to keep tabs on, which is really the seller dictated side of this puzzle. So we've got now a marketplace created where buyers and buyers agents are having to have more conversations about fees and services, which we would expect to lead to slightly lower fees and slightly better service. If it's more transparent and that's happening in a more regular way, that would increase competition. I will say, from having worked with tens of thousands of really good agents, anytime you can, either increase the quality of your service or lower your fees, I would bet on the agents to find every way possible to increase their service before they lower their fee. We'll see how far they're able to convince consumers that's a good trade. But then this other question is, if sellers don't cooperate and don't offer any kind of concession, and buyers are forced to pay for representation in cash instead of rolling the cost of representation into their mortgage as part of the purchase price of the home, then homes just become less affordable. And this is really bad for everyone. And this is the biggest concern that agents had in our survey. When we ask them about, what aspects of this are you kind of worried and not worried about? Let me find where that was. You know, one of the biggest concerns is commission costs falling on buyers, and agents are really concerned about that. The other major concern you see here in red is listings can't advertise to fixed buyer's agent commission. What agents are obviously really getting at here is, if buyers are paying for their representation out of pocket, number one, homes are just less affordable. And then number two, the most disadvantaged people who most need representation are the ones disproportionately impacted because they have the least cash to close. One big thing, I'll hush up in a second so we can have a little more back and forth, but one of the big things I just want to call out about this, to be really explicit, is there's nothing stopping sellers from offering a concession the same way that they used to offer a buyer's agent fee. And we're seeing that emerge as the new norm in our deal pipeline. Sellers, by and large, are getting coached by their agents that if you don't agree to cover the cost of representation for your buyer up to some reasonable amount, it's going to shrink the universe of buyers who can afford to purchase your home, because cash to close is the biggest limiting factor on affordability for most buyers, not their monthly payment. And so sellers are going through a crash course and getting educated on this. And agents are on the front line, listing agents are on the front line having that conversation, so that sellers understand one of their closing costs is likely going to be a concession to the buyer. And the kind of interesting piece of this, though, is that as we see agents doing that, and we do see it emerging as a norm, the third bullet point on this slide is that 65% of agents said that they would be willing to work as a listing agent for a seller who refused to offer any concession to buyers. So we'll have to see sort of how the new normal of standards of professional collaboration actually play out. And what sellers are willing to do is they go through the crash course in financial literacy on how you net out in a real estate transaction. Because in reality, obviously, offering that concession is no different than how people were transacting from the seller's point of view just a month ago.
Yeah.
All right, let me pause there.
Yeah, Drew has a question. He says sellers can't advertise it, right? But sellers actually can advertise. They just can't advertise it on MLS.
That's right.
The only restriction.
So
right?
a seller can advertise a commission, or sorry, not a commission, a concession, and a buyer's agent can, or sorry, a listing agent can agree with their seller that they're willing to disclose to people considering making an offer that they're willing to offer a concession. Now, what's changed for you as a home seller is if you put up in my area in St. Louis, 2.7% has been the standard buyer's agent fee for a long time. It's just the most common rate. And obviously you see deviations, but it is the industry norm in our area. And now if I put up a concession saying I'll offer, 2.7% concession, you can use it towards closing costs, you can cover the cost of representation. Well, Melissa, if you go negotiate with Rob as your buyer's agent with his beautiful prom photo, and you negotiate with Rob to provide his services for just a 2% fee, you're now pocketing the other 70 basis points there. So that's what really has changed, is buyers have an ability to gain the difference when they negotiate a lower rate with their agent, which creates that competitive dynamic. But to Drew's point in the chat, you can still offer, there are ways to collaborate and to coordinate. It's just those ways have to be disclosed in this very public fashion that empowers buyers who are not working with an agent just as much as it informs the buyer's agents who are trying to see where they can make a paycheck.
All right, Rob, Luke and I have been nerding out on data here for a little bit, but I want to make sure we have a moment to breathe so that you can ask some questions too.
Well, I wanted to know, Luke, so when you talk about a survey,
yeah,
how big is your survey size?
So these are typically 600 agents, although this most recent one that we did was significantly larger because we wanted to get a bigger sample from outside our network. So I forget how many data points the team had, but it was north of 1,000 on this most recent post-NAR data that we're looking at here.
I forget my statistics from grad school, but I will assume that that the sample size is statistically accurate. Do you work with, Inman has made a name for itself, which, Melissa, if you ever get me liquored up sometime, I will tell you the story about when Inman wanted to buy my little company, Chrisman LLC.
Monday night,
Luke,
my friend.
he's an interesting cat. But do you work with Inman at all, Luke, or is NAR picking up on your survey results and saying, here's what's going on out there?
So just a little backstory on Clever's research arm. So I mentioned that we generate, millions up to low tens of millions of consumers coming to us as a source of education and content. So we have a research arm that acquires proprietary data on different real estate topics to power that content. And as we do that, we also publish a lot of our findings to industry audiences or general media audiences. So if you remember about 7 or 8 months ago, when the NAR settlement really started making the rounds in Wall Street Journal and New York Times, what blew it onto the spotlight was actually a report from an organization called KBW, which is a division of Stifel Financial. And their report that kind of put this into the media spotlight used Clever's data on commission rates. So we weren't the headliner, but we had a great assist there. And as far as I know, our survey on commission rates is the most authoritative survey in the industry of what agents are seeing on the ground. So that's kind of where this data is coming from. And then it has made its way pretty far out. I'm going to end my sort of like blurb on Clever's great. You'll see our research everywhere once you start looking for our web brands. Did that get at the question though, Rob, of like?
Yeah, it did. No, thank you very much. So where do we go? We only have 3 minutes left on this call. I mean, this call really does fly by. Where does the business go from here? Do you think the dust has settled? Do you think everyone's kind of settled into a norm, or is there room for change going forward? Where do we go from here?
So I think there is significant room for change. I think people who bet on the industry sort of getting flipped on its head overnight, you can make that bet, but folks who have made that bet have generally been wrong. Now, if you were to bet on incremental change through ever heightening competition, you would have been right, 10 times out of 10 on what actually has changed in the industry over the last few decades. So what we see is buyers agents training up to position their value. We see folks adopting new standards and practices for how they're going to respond to these changes and make the case that their services are worth something in the range of 2% of a home. And I do think we'll continue to see folks like Clever look for ways to negotiate better service and better value on behalf of consumers, right? On the listing side, we have top realtors all over the country working for a 1.5% listing fee. So there's been a lot of competition for a long time and a lot of pressure starting to emerge on rates. It becomes a lot easier for organizations like us to do that in a sensible way on the buy side now in this new kind of regime. The last thing I wanted to hit on is that I think we can definitely bet on consolidation and a continued trend of professionalization in the industry. Agents with less experience, less sales volume leaving, not being able to make that pitch and position their value. And then agents who have the infrastructure, the technology, the operations, the team around them being able to claim market share and continue to earn the business of consumers.
Good answer. Thank you.
But
Good call. Thanks for being on.
yeah. Drake had a question in here, which I think would be fun to talk about. He says, is there a world where mortgage companies allow the buyer to decide a credit for the buyer's agent commission, essentially still rolling it into the mortgage, but the buyer decides it instead of the seller? So the buyer is basically choosing their commission, but doing a credit for it.
Yeah, so even better and kind of more direct than that, Fannie Freddie have come out and said that they will treat concessions used to pay for real estate services that traditionally have been rolled into the cost of the loan. They won't count that towards your concession limit, which again was a very innovative way of saying nothing's going to change. And so there is already kind of this, again, innovate to preserve the status quo, adaptation from the mortgage side to say that you can roll the cost of representation into the mortgage just as you've done for decades and decades. And that can be decided between the buyer and the mortgage lender. But to your point, Drake, that does still depend on the seller being on board. Now, we might go, it shouldn't be that hard to get the seller on board, because in the very worst case, you're just saying, well, let's just add 2% onto my offer. And isn't it all a wash right now? So I think that's the kind of stuff playing on the ground, is sellers trying to learn how their net sort of plays out, and buyers trying to see what they can get away with given the market dynamic. But none of that is fundamentally new. When we step back and go, like, what's fundamentally new and different now, it's really coming down to buyers agents being forced to have that conversation and learn how to position their value.
Yeah. Robert has a great comment. Basically, the same concern that you and I had at the beginning around first-time home buyers. Like, what is the impact of this on first-time home buyers? And I don't know that we can see that right now. I do see some DPA programs, Robert, that are starting to define whether their DPA can be used to pay for commissions. So just kind of keep your eyes out for your local DPA. But there are some that are starting to make some changes to be able to help with that. But we'll just have to keep our eyes on it and see. And I know we're over time, but we've had such a great discussion. I didn't want to cut it short. We've had lots of great feedback from everybody. But I do want to be conscious of everybody's time this afternoon too. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Luke, thank you so much for all the awesome data and for being the expert with us today to give us some real insights on what realtors are seeing, or real estate agents are seeing. I have such a hard time. I want to say realtor to everything, but real estate agents are seeing. We really appreciate it. Hope everybody has a fantastic Friday afternoon, and we'll see you right back here next week.
We should have Luke on next week, Melissa.
Next week. Yeah. All right. Bye,
Thank you, Luke.
guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Take care.